All right. Quick agenda. We'll run through the three separate funds that the Unitarian Society manages. Tonight we'll be focusing in on our operating fund, but I wanted to just give a brief overview of the three separate funds that Unitarian Society has and manages. We'll talk a little bit about the budget planning process, how this budget came to be, give you a brief snapshot of our current fiscal year's projections. Then we'll, of course, review the proposed budget for this coming year, and we'll have some time to answer questions at the end. I'll ask that if you would like to, go ahead and put your questions in the chat, and we'll try to answer all of them at the end of the presentation. But you're welcome to put your questions in the chat as we go, just so you don't forget any questions you might have as we run through the slideshow. Okay. So just a quick snapshot of the three funds. Since we had the capital campaign in the fall this year, a lot of questions have come up, especially around some newer members, about the three separate funds that we as a congregation manage. Tonight we're focusing on the operating fund. And the operating fund is really the meat and potatoes of what we do each year. It consists of our annual budget, largely supported by those annual pledges. And it's all of our operating costs day in and day out. Connected to our operating fund is also what we call restricted funds. So those are funds that are restricted for a certain purpose. So for instance, we have an ordination coming up and we have income specific for the ordination that is restricted fund. The donor has given funds for the ordination specifically for that use. So restricted funds are part of our operating budget, but they're not the budget that we will see tonight. They're just a piece of our operating financials. They show on a balance sheet separate from our profit and loss, which is what is our operating budget. And then the second fund is a capital campaign. So you've all heard a lot about this. This is a once in a 10 to 20 year endeavor for major one-time capital improvements to the campus. And that's funded by a 3-year campaign. So we wrapped up that campaign earlier this year in early 2026. And members who had pledged to that capital campaign will be giving over a 3-year time period. And then the funds for the capital campaign are a sort of restricted fund. They're only used for those capital improvements. They're not used for operating expense. And then third and finally, we have the endowment fund. So that's long-term investments in the stock market. The endowment fund is actually its own separate 501c3 organization, which is closely linked to the congregation, and it provides ongoing operating support to our congregation as well. So you'll see when we get later into the slide deck, you'll see a slide about investment income. Part of that investment income is from our endowment distributing a portion of their interest to the operating fund. It provides roughly about $100,000 a year, a little bit over that this last year. And the endowment is funded by restricted donations and also unrestricted bequests. So there are some donors who have given explicitly to the endowment, so those are restricted by the donor. And the board has also decided to include a portion of all unrestricted bequests, so just general bequest gifts to the endowment as well. That's a little overview of those three funds, so kind of clarifying, just as a reminder, we'll be talking largely about our operating fund tonight. All right, just a brief overview of the budget planning process. It doesn't happen without a team. So I just wanted to say thank you to our group of budget planners. You'll see their names here this year. These folks help us build a proposed balanced budget for the coming year. Typically myself, Julia, and our board treasurer, Buzz, sit in on the budget planning task force as well. Huge thanks. Not a lot of folks want to spend time in their evening crunching through numbers, but we always have really great ideas and thoughts that come up each year when we do this budget planning. So I really appreciate all those folks joining on this year, especially to our newer folks who came on. Next year, I have here, next year is at you. It's a staff-led group, but if you are at all interested, we get started on the budget planning process. You'll see here in this slide around February, earlier in the year. Members of the budget planning task force meet about monthly. In April, we typically try and have a draft budget for the board to review. The board will then clarify any priorities they have for the coming year. And then in May, just last night, in fact, the board usually approves the final draft of the budget, which they did. A fiscal plan. You'll see the words fiscal plan and budget sort of interchangeably on our bylaws. It's called a fiscal plan, but we're talking about the budget. The fiscal plan is distributed to the congregation in May, and then we'll usually hold a town hall meeting as we're doing tonight. June will be our annual meeting. So we have our annual meeting June 7th. It's just after service around 11:30 a.m. And a couple of Sundays from now. That's when the membership votes on the proposed budget. But budgeting really is a year-round process. So apart from that February to June timeline I just showed you, we really take a look at our financials frequently. So monthly, our finance committee reviews the financials, and the board also receives a dashboard overview of our financials. Quarterly, we review financials and program budgets as a staff, and then the board and finance committee receive a special quarterly budget report. As needed, we can make adjustments throughout the year. If there's anything that materially deviates from the congregation approved budget, the board has to vote on that. That's only happened once in my almost 14 years here during the pandemic. The board had to vote for a material deviation on our budget for some probably obvious reasons. Okay, so here's our 25-26. Just a reminder, our budget is based on a fiscal year. So it starts in July and ends in June. So we're coming up on the end of our current fiscal year. And these are our projections. I just wanted to give a snapshot sort of overview, not to get you too lost in the weeds here in the details, but I'll give you a demonstration of mainly two things. You'll see here in yellow is our projected income for each category. And then this gray or white is the budgeted income for each category. And so the idea here is our income is very close on our projected income is very close to our budgeted income in all of these categories. The one exception being fundraising, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, having to do with the annual auction. Similarly, in this area, the green is our projected expenses in each category, and the grayish white is our budgeted expenses in each category. And so very close. We usually end the year very, very near our actual budget, or our actual income and expense usually closes out very close to where we budgeted. Okay. All right, then moving along to this coming year's proposed budget. Don't worry about memorizing this table. We'll go through item by item on income and expense. But in green here, you'll see our proposed income and expenses for this coming year, starting in July. And then in the blue, you'll see our current year's budgeted income and expenses, which ends on June 30th. So this little column here is just the change between the 2 years. Overall, our budget is just increasing by 4%. So not a huge increase over next year. You'll see the sort of the theme of our proposed budget for next year is not a lot of changes drastically one way or another. Okay, so we'll go through the income, each item in income, piece by piece. To give you a overview of our proposed income, you'll see that annual pledges really make up the lion's share of our income, followed closely by income from our property. So room rentals and weddings, about 19%, and then long-term leases of our property is about 19%. So those are the three really large income areas. Investment is a close third, with 17% of our income, and then we've got fundraising and contributions being other pieces of the pie. Okay, annual pledges. They're our largest slice of the income pie, 38%. So we really do fund our work each year. We are asking for everyone to pledge by June 7th for this coming fiscal year. Our total proposed income for next fiscal year, net of fees is $420, but the gross amount, which you'll hear a lot in these pledge appeal letters, is $425,000. And that's about a 3% increase over this current fiscal year. So next year, we're hoping folks can increase their pledges if possible by about 5 to 10%. We've received pledges from 55 households so far for next fiscal year, which is great. It's not too late to pledge if you haven't already. The pledge form is on our website at ussb.org/pledge. Or if you go to our homepage, you'll see one of the big squares on the homepage will take you right to the pledge form there. All right. And then next slide is fundraising. So fundraising is about 3% of our overall budget. We unfortunately were not able to host an auction this year. We had been planning for a small, simple auction, but there was just so much going on in the life of the congregation. We've had potlucks and dances and a lot of congregational activities. So we're really just shoring up all that excitement and energy for a really big auction this coming October. And so that's the $30,000, a part of the $30,100 you see proposed for next year. You'll see this is a 54% increase over our budget, but almost 100% increase over our actual since we decided not to have the auction this year. This also includes income from the Fashion Fling. So the Fashion Fling has been a great source of fundraising income for us, holding steady at about a couple $1,000s they raise a year, and it's just a really fun event. We are scheduling our auction for October 3rd. So if you haven't marked your calendars, you will hear a lot more about the auction over the coming months. But hoping to have a big celebration this October. Okay, contributions income, about 4% of the pie. That includes non-pledged gifts. So gifts that come in from, let's say, a member is particularly inspired and wants to make a gift over and above their pledge, that counts as a contribution. Or let's say you have a family member visiting and they want to make a nice donation and it's not a pledge, that comes in as a contribution. This also includes plate gifts. So we give away a quarter of our plate each week to a nonprofit of choice. The other 75% goes into our contributions budget. You'll see a 31% increase here, which seems high. However, this is a 31% increase over our budget for this year. Our projections are actually higher. Our projections are great, especially for plate income. So plate income has been on the rise. It's been an income item that the Finance Committee has talked a lot about, and we're glad to see with full attendance, really well-attended services and new members and visitors that our plate income is trending up. All right, wedding and event rental. So this is a lot of the behind the scenes income that happens in the congregation. We host about 30 weddings a year, which is a huge number. If you think about everything that happens here in our building. And that income goes directly into our operating budget. It also includes room rentals. So people who rent on a monthly basis or once a year, and other events. We've held quinceañeras and graduation parties and things. So all of that income from those rentals goes into this budget here. We're looking at about a 5% increase this next year over what we have budgeted this year. Long-term leases. So this includes the 2 schools that rent our property, Star King and Knox School. And then we also own 2 residential homes, the Parsonage, which is next door on Arriaga Street. And then we own another home on La Paz Alleyway, just sort of behind the Star King Nursery Yard. And so that rental income goes into this budget, long-term leases. And overall, between those 2 schools and 2 homes, we're looking at about a 2% increase next year. Okay, investment income. This is going back to the endowment. So the endowment provides us roughly $100,000 in operating revenue, excuse me, each year. And then we also receive investment income from a separately held and controlled endowment called the Cummins Fund. So that's managed by the Oregon Community Foundation. We have no say over how they allocate their investment, but we do receive about $70,000 from them each year, and that goes into our operating income. So between the 2, we're looking at close to $200,000 next year in investment income. It also, the third item is it includes interest from some CDs. So we do have a few CDs that hold our reserve funds, and those generate interest, which goes into our operating budget as well. All right, moving on to expenses for next year. Here's the large pie. Largest slice, you can see here, 56% is staff salaries. The following, the second largest slice would be benefits for staff. So we'll look at these on the next slide together. Facility is another large piece of the pie as well, upkeep of our facilities. And then you'll see followed by administrative costs, programs, nomination support, interest, and principal expense. So we'll go over all of these. All right, staff and benefits. As with most UU congregations, staff and benefits are the largest slices of the pie. The UUA provides all UU congregations with what they consider fair compensation and benefit guidelines. Our board has really prioritized making sure that we're within those fair compensation and benefit guidelines, and we are, I'm happy to say we are, providing all staff with benefits and salaries in line with the UUA's guidelines. We are not looking at any large increase in hours next year for staff. We're really just holding steady with the current staffing structure. And we're looking at an overall 2% increase in staffing costs, largely due to lowering subscriptions in our health plan actually brings our benefits down a little bit. And then we're able to provide all staff with a cost of living adjustment for next year in this budget. All right, next up is facilities. You'll see this is a 13% increase, but one of the areas we're projecting a bit of an overrun this year at the end of the budget year is in facilities. The cost of maintenance, as you might imagine, on a 100-year-old property continues to rise. The number of repairs needed continues to rise. Insurance costs are holding relatively steady for this coming year. Our utility costs, like everyone else, we're seeing increases there as well. And so it also includes contract services like landscaping and some custodial, post-event custodial costs, and all the supplies it takes to run this whole campus. We have administration. This is cost related to our computer, any cost related to computers and software, IT support. We do contract out with a great IT provider who keeps all of our data secure. It includes our bookkeeping costs, payroll service, banking fees, office supplies, internet and office equipment. We do have a little bit of an increase for next year, largely due to some new computers needed for a couple staff members and some new hardware our IT folks are asking us to upgrade, and then some computer software cost increases for next year. Programs. We also call this supplements to programs, just to make it really clear that this is not in any way the entire budget for our programs here at the Society. These are supplemental costs. So things like if Children's Religious Exploration needs to purchase some art supplies or extra snacks for the kids, membership is having a new member luncheon, so food for that luncheon. It doesn't include any of the staffing costs related to these programs or any restricted funds from special fundraiser for instance, the Mexicali trip or the Hopi trip. Those are not included in this slice of the pie. Looking at a 23% increase for next year. And that is because we have budgeted for this coming November a big party, our 150th anniversary celebration. Was budgeted under programs. So that's a large percentage increase there, a large part of that percentage increase. Denomination support, we're looking at holding steady for next year. This year we've contributed to 55% of what the UA calls fair share contributions. They have a very complicated calculation formula that they have for just determining what is a fair share contribution. And so we're holding steady at 55% of fair share, kind of like the other areas of our budget. This is not a year to look at, huge projections and increase or huge projection expense. So like the overall theme of our budget, holding steady at 55% of fair share. Interest and principal, we have one mortgage, formerly called a commercial loan. That loan is on the parsonage property. Its current balance is about $786,000. And so this expense includes all of those payments in principal and interest against that one loan. We are going to be required to refinance in 2027, which makes me and our finance committee very sad because we were able to get a killer interest rate back in, I think, 2021 when we originally financed that loan. All right, and then a budget summary. So we're budgeting relatively flat in both income and expense. I pointed out that we're hoping to have a larger auction fundraiser in October, which will bump us up from where we are this year. And we've got that goal of $425,000 in annual pledge income. Plate income is on the rise, which is great. And program expenses, we've got that allowance for the 150th anniversary celebration, and admin expense includes some computer upgrades. So apart from those bullet points I've just mentioned, we're really pretty, for the most part, holding steady. We've got an overall 4% increase next year for our operating budget. All right. I will take questions. I'm just going to stop share so I can see you all. All right. I did a lot of talking, so unless don't see any questions in the chat, unless anyone wants to shout out their questions, if you have any. No questions. You're an easy crowd. Thank you. Well, again, I'll put this presentation recording up on our annual meeting webpage in case you want to hear me talk for another half hour, you're welcome to go watch it again. And it'll be available for other members of the congregation who may not have been here tonight. So, Bob, did you have?
Yeah, Erin, I just want to say that that was a very clear presentation. It was, and maybe the reason why you have no questions is because you answered all the questions. The way the pie charts were broken out with each section, it just made everything very clear. So great job. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. And thanks again to the budget planning team who really helped polish
Yeah,
that up.
I want to just chime in with gratitude for the budget planning team. It's always great to have a group of people looking at these numbers, asking really good questions. I think one of the reasons why we wind up with such the ability to present the budget so clearly is because that group has really worked through a lot of the fine details of the budget, which then means we come out with a very clear concept of where we're headed into this next year. And the finance team does such a great job over the course of the year monitoring our spending and keeping an eye on the future so that we are not caught by surprise but have the ability to plan mindfully and thoughtfully. So a lot of appreciation for the many minds that went into this year's budget and keeping track of things on an ongoing basis.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for spending your evening with me. Hope to see you this Sunday at Carolyn's ordination. Okay.
Bye.
Take care.
Take care, everyone.